With the big story this hour, the latest coming in with regards to the whole Syria gas attack. Well, the Russian Defense Ministry has now admitted that it was a Syrian jet that bombed Idlib on Tuesday. But Russia's Defense Ministry also claims that the Syrian jets hit a terrorist warehouse that possibly contained toxic substances in that region. Russia's statement comes amid worldwide condemnation of the attack. Here's the death toll right now as it stands. At least 78 people killed, including 20 children. At least 300 others are hurt. Many are being treated for the suspected sarin gas poisoning. The World Health Organization has said that some victims are even showing symptoms that are consistent with exposure to a category of chemicals that include nerve agents. The United Nations, though, is still yet to confirm whether sarin gas was used in the attack. A spokesperson for the UN confirmed that the prohibition of chemical weapons had already begun collecting and analyzing some of the information there on the ground from Idlib. But at this point, the use of chemical weapons is still alarming and quite disturbing.
We're not currently in a position to verify the reports. I saw that earlier today. The OPCW fact-finding mission has already announced that it's begun gathering information to attempt to confirm that chemical weapons were used. Obviously, any sort of report of use of chemical weapons, especially on civilians, is extremely alarming and disturbing.
The United Nations Security Council is set to take up a draft resolution moved by the United States, France, and Britain that condemns the Idlib attack. The Syrian military has, however, denied any responsibility and says it would never use chemical weapons. Meanwhile, warplanes mounted 5 airstrikes on Wednesday near the rebel-held town of Khan Sheikhoun. This is also in Idlib, where the suspected chemical attack took place earlier this week. Observer groups also did not immediately identify the warplanes. Well, the United States and the European Union have now blamed the Bashar al-Assad government for the deadly chemical attack. The Idlib attack is marked as the deadliest chemical attack in Syria since sarin gas, which killed hundreds of civilians in Ghouta near the capital back in August of 2013. The White House says it is confident that Bashar al-Assad's government was behind the chemical attack and stated that the incident was reprehensible and cannot be ignored by the civilized world. The Trump government also stated that the attack was a consequence of former President Barack Obama's administration on weakness and irresolution.
Today's chemical attack in Syria against innocent people, including women and children, is reprehensible and cannot be ignored by the civilized world. These heinous actions by the Bashar al-Assad regime are a consequence of the past administration's weakness and irresolution. President Obama said in 2012 that he would establish a quote-unquote red line.
Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson said in a statement that the attack shows how President Bashar al-Assad operates with brutal and unabashed barbarism. He has urged Russia and Iran to use their influence over Syria to ensure such horrific attacks don't happen again. Meanwhile, European Union diplomatic chief Federica Mogherini has said that the regime of the Bashar al-Assad government bears primary responsibility after the suspected chemical attack in Syria. Let's listen to more world reactions.
Well, I'm appalled by the reports that there's been a chemical weapons attack on a town south of Idlib, allegedly by the Syrian regime. We condemn the use of chemical weapons in all circumstances. If proven, this will be further evidence of the barbarism of the Syrian regime. The UK has led international efforts to call to account the Syrian regime and Daesh for the use of chemical weapons, and I would urge the Organisation for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons to investigate this incident as soon as possible. I'm very clear that there can be no future for Assad in a stable Syria which is representative of all the Syrian people, and I call on all of the parties involved to ensure that we have a transition away from Assad. We cannot allow this suffering to continue.
Babies suffocating from a chemical attack in Syria. I was shocked and outraged. There's no excuse whatsoever for the deliberate attack on civilians and on children especially with cruel and outlawed chemical weapons. I call on the international community to fulfill its obligation from 2013 to fully and finally remove these horrible weapons from Syria.
What we have understood, it was a chemical attack and it came from the air. We have been and we will be stimulating all those who have the capacity of finding out technically what it happened. OPCW is an obvious, for instance, a candidate for doing so, in order to be able to be much more precise. What we do know is that it was a horror.
Chemical weapons as the worst of the war crimes, and whoever is responsible for that must be held accountable.
Quite horrific indeed. Let's also get some reaction from some of the victims and those who saw the attacks unfold describe their horrific ordeal.
كنا نايمين في البيت ضرب بين الساعة 6 الصبح والسبعة ضرب طلعت لسه في عالم ولا كيباع والمنبر الكيماوي طلعت أسافنا عالم لسه طالع فيها
قذيفة طلع فيها دخان كثير.
أيوة.
طلع فيها معها دخان كثير وصار ريحة.
إيه صار نفس.
صار نفسنا كثير ما عاد نحسن نتنفس.
All right, moving on now to other stories. Another big story we're tracking for you this hour, the latest in the St. Petersburg, Russia metro blast that took place on Monday this week. Russia's investigative committee has now said it has detained 6 Central Asian citizens with regards to the attack. This on suspicion of facilitating more terror activities and recruiting compatriots into terror groups. Reports suggest that the detainees are suspected of recruiting mostly immigrants from Central Asian countries to commit terror crimes. An explosion hit an underground carriage on the stretch between 2 metro stations in the central part of St. Petersburg, killing at least 14 people and injuring dozens others earlier this week. That committee has also opened a criminal investigation into the suspected terrorist attack. Closer to home now, India has reiterated that the attacks on Africans near the capital, New Delhi, are criminal acts and they should not be dubbed as racial attacks. In Parliament, Sushma Swaraj rejected a statement by a group of African envoys that the attacks were xenophobic. She also added and recounted the action taken by authorities in the wakes of the attacks in Greater Noida, just outside of Delhi. Sushma asserted that action is being taken against the culprits and 6 people have already been arrested.
भारत सरकार के द्वारा जो कार्रवाई की गई है उसको किसी भी शब्दों में इनएडिक्वेट नहीं कहा जा सकता। जो आपके स्थगन प्रस्ताव में किसी भी कीमत पर इनएडिक्वेट नहीं कहा जा सकता। हम लोग पूरा प्रयत्न कर रहे हैं, निष्पक्ष जांच होगी, जो दोषी पाया जाएगा उसके खिलाफ कठोर कार्रवाई होगी और अफ्रीकनों की ऐसा केवल नाइजीरियों की नहीं, पूरे के पूरे अफ्रीकों के और जितने भी देश की नागरिक इस देश में रह रहे हैं उनके प्रति भारत सरकार कृतसंकल्प है कि वो सुरक्षित रहें और इसके लिए मैं आपके माध्यम से सदन को आश्वस्त करती हूं।
Well, a shocking case of cow vigilantism just caught on camera in the western Indian state of Rajasthan. Take a look at this. One person has been killed after a mob of self-appointed cow vigilantes, well, they attacked a group of 5 men who were taking cows in Alwar. The 5 of them even had documents that they showed saying they purchased the cows from a fair in Jaipur, but regardless of that, they were still attacked brutally. The attack was carried out by a group of Gau Rakshaks, or cow protectors, who are allegedly affiliated with the VHP, the Vishwa Hindu Parishad.
तो कुछ गौ भक्त भी हैं जिनको जैसी सूचना मिलती है इस कानून के तहत रोकने का प्रयास करते हैं। रोकना तक तो कोई गुनाह नहीं है, लेकिन कानून हाथ में लेना यह अपराध है।
Well, Pakistan has once again violated ceasefire along the line of control, the LOC, in the Poonch sector of Kashmir. It is the 4th time they've violated this in the last 48 hours. Pakistani troops on Tuesday shelled Indian posts and civilian areas along the LOC in the Rajouri district. They've also resorted to firing and shelling of mortar bombs in the Balakoti sector of that district on Monday. Pakistan's army had initiated indiscriminate firing of small arms, automatic and mortar shells on Indian army posts along the LOC. Well, staying in Pakistan, 6 people, including 4 soldiers, have died in a suicide blast targeting a census team in Lahore on Wednesday morning. At least 19 others were hurt in that attack. It was apparently a cylinder blast in Pakistan. The Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, or the TTP, has now claimed responsibility for the attack. Reports suggest targeting of personnel involved in the census is the first one in 19 years. It also underlines the challenges that government institutions have to face in the country. The Army Chief General there said the census would still be completed, though, at any cost. Well, China's foreign ministry has said that the Dalai Lama's visit to Arunachal Pradesh in India has now seriously damaged India and China's relationship. The Tibetan spiritual leader has hit back at China for criticizing his visit to India's northeastern state.
No problem. To some people, even, you see, consider me as a demon. I'm, you see, also the messenger of ancient Indian thought. Wherever I go, I always say, talking about ahimsa, religious harmony, and secular ethics. These are Indian message. Wherever I go, I always
status of a state guest and all the facilities.
The newspaper, the Global Times, has published an article by an unnamed expert saying that New Delhi is using Dalai Lama's Tawang visit to upset Beijing. It also said that this was not the first time that India has used the Dalai Lama card to express its displeasure to China. Earlier, the Minister of State for Home, Kiran Rijiju, called the Dalai Lama's visit a purely religious one and denied any political angle to it.
He is not there with any political motive. So, unnecessary issues should not be racked up due to the visit of His Holiness Dalai Lama to the state of Arunachal Pradesh. We don't intend to have any kind of damage in the relationship between India and China. I hope that the relationship between India and China, which is very friendly, should not bear any kind of adverse impact due to this visit.
Well, Lobsang, Sangay, the Prime Minister of the Tibetan government in exile, speaks to us about the Arunachal Pradesh issue and China. Listen in.
Yeah, they make that kind of noise, and they have this kind of grand strategy and trying to get something. But Arunachal Pradesh or Tawang is a settled issue, as per the similar agreement in 1914, which was signed between Tibet, government of Tibet, and British India at that time. So on the sideline, they also had demarcated a border, and it's called McMahon Line. And at that time, China did not object on the border between India and Tibet. Their objection was more a borderline between Tibet and China. So even that historical documents clearly show that Tawang or Arunachal Pradesh was not an issue for the Chinese government. In some sense, we have been saying that if you want to understand China, you must understand Tibet or Tibet narrative or Tibet story. Once you understand what happened to Tibet, you will truly understand China. So when Tibet was occupied, we said, we are occupied, help us, all the neighboring countries. And around the world, they said, well, it happened to you, you are an exception, good luck to you, it will not happen to us. So with that belief, they kept quiet. Now what you see in South China Sea, East China Sea, border incursion in India or Nepal or anywhere, now everybody, all the neighboring countries is saying, how come China is in our doorstep? So we've been telling you for 50-some years, it happened to us, it could happen to you.